So what are we going to cover in this chapter? So this chapter is really all about setup, and in the setup we're going to go through the configurations for Windows, the configurations for desktops in general, configurations for a server itself, namely a Linux server, and also specifically how to change the different versions of NPM and Node.js, which are quite different than how it's done on a desktop. With that said, let's jump right into our first lecture. And in the first lecture, we're going to be focused on our Windows users. So if you're running on a Mac, you could stop this video already now and go on to the next video. But if you are a Windows user, what we're going to do in this lecture is we're going to help you make your operating system work more similarly to the way things work on a Linux, on a Mac, because all of the rest of the videos are going to be focused on those users, because the production files usually sit on a Linux, which their language is comparable and very similar to the way we work on Mac. So with that said, for our Windows users, in this lecture, we're going to go ahead and set up a terminal which will mimic the terminal that is available on a Mac and on a Linux operating system, making our Windows users have a similar setting to the remainder chapter. So let's jump right into it, Windows users. Let's see how we set things up to get things working the way that we're going to be working with from the next chapter and onwards. Before we could start installing and working with Node.js, we need to make sure that you have access to a terminal. If you're working on Mac, you already have access to Terminal. It's an application that runs on Mac OS. If you're running on any Linux device, you're probably familiar with the way you go to your Linux prompt, which will work the same way. Now, when you're working on Contraire on Windows, you're going to discover that you don't have access to the same Linux commands as we have and will be working with within this course and within most lectures and documentation on Node.js. So to join us, make sure that if you're running on Windows, you install Cygwin. I can't pronounce it. There's other applications that do the same thing, but what they do, it's a wrapper that mimics the behaviors on Linux. So go ahead and based on if you have, the link is going to be in the description to this video. Make sure to install or update, basically install the 32-bit version or the 64-bit version, depending on your version of Windows. I'm going to go ahead and install the 32-bit version, and I'm going to run it. And once installation will complete, just follow the prompts and go ahead and go through the process of the installation. I'm going to keep everything in its default and just click next, next, next until we get it downloaded and installed. Now, once you have Cygwin installed, and I'm going to, it's a little bit out of my screen right now, but I'm going to just go ahead and keep everything the way it is. I'm not going to select any package, and I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to click on next, and I'm going to just go ahead and install whatever the defaults have been. So once installation completes, we're going to set up the desktop, add it to the start, or I'm going to click here on finish, and once I'm done with this, now, because I set everything up to be in the default, if you look at your prompt, you will see that on your desktop, you should have the Cygwin terminal. Now, if I go ahead and double click in it, I'm going to be entered into this terminal. Well, basically, anytime that I actually mention and say terminal or say go on to your terminal, or you see me working in a prompt, make sure that you open the Cygwin terminal, because we're going to refer to it to the remainder of the course as terminal. In the next lecture, we're going to be operating system agnostic as we go back into my Mac, and on the Mac itself, we're going to go ahead and install Node.js and NPM, but the actions that we're going to be doing are going to be the same as they're done on Windows. So we'll see you in the next lecture.